Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today on The Hit podcast, I was delighted to be joined by Emma Palmer, Chief Executive of Eastlight Community Homes. We talk about her recent award win of the Lifetime Achievement Award, how she navigated a merger during the global pandemic, their unrelenting drive towards community, and how that unrelenting drive has led them to create some resident initiatives that have really had an impact in the lives of their tenants, and also talked about her journey through her career and how she got into housing and what the journey's been since. I hope you like the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you.
We're doing this after the CIH, so I don't know how we scheduled it this way, but on the Thursday after the CIH, so I think we're both slightly tired, but a bit of focus.
Grueling week, but yes, James, I will do my best.
Amazing. As I always like to start, do you mind just giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself for the listeners?
Sure, okay. Well, as you say, Emma Palmer, I'm Chief Executive at Eastlight Community Homes, based in Braintree in Essex. I've always worked in housing, mostly in housing associations with a small jaunt into local authorities, and always in the east of England and kind of outer London, really. So, I picked housing as a career, and as I say, I've been in it since I was 18, I love what I do.
Yeah, I saw that 18. I always ask this question. So why housing? Because clearly you chose it. Most people don't say that. So why was it for you? Why did you want to get into housing?
Yeah, I did actually. It started when I was, I think, 14. I did some work experience at a local authority, some council housing. I went and did some shadowing for a couple of weeks with a housing officer. I decided that's what I wanted to do, and so off I went. Why did I choose it? I was really interested in kind of human geography stuff and the people aspect, as opposed to the kind of necessarily the property aspect at the time, and kind of how communities worked and how housing sort of helped or didn't help make communities sort of functional, really. So yeah. I just kind of connected with that stuff, and I guess that's why I chose it originally. I mean, since I've been in the sector, there's obviously a whole bunch of other reasons why I would choose it too. But that's what attracted me to the sector. I was really lucky that I had an opportunity to join what was then a management trainee scheme. It was a new scheme that back in the 90s that a local housing association had put together, and they took 4 management trainees on at the same time, and we got a broad range of experience in that organisation, and we were offered the opportunity to do a degree as part of that trainee course as well. So I was lucky enough to get myself a degree in housing management and development through that too.
I love that. And obviously, we've just done the CIH. You've just won the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Housing Heroes Awards. Tell us about that, because you must be made up. I mean, what a recognition to your career. And as you say, it's mid-career, you know? So tell us a little bit about it. How did it come about? Kind of what was the reasons you think you won?
Sure, James. Well, yes, bewildered is the word that I'm using, because there were so many great finalists, and as you say, quite often these sort of awards go to people as they are retiring, and I'm kind of hoping I've got a few years left in me yet, but I guess none of us know.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I guess I joined early, 18. I've got sort of 30 plus years there to draw on, and so when somebody asked if they were happy that they nominated me, I think when they were pulling the original citation together, they found that there was kind of lots of stuff there that maybe any number of us that are leaders in the sector just kind of take for granted that it's things that we do as, what we consider sort of part of the day job, part of our responsibility and what we're accountable for. But so I think for me, there was a number of things that kind of played to what the judges were looking for, I suppose, in terms of kind of work across the sector, not just within the organisation. But yes, I'm made up to. And had I have had any kind of inkling that I was going to be anywhere near winning, I would certainly have taken the opportunity to buy myself a new dress, and I didn't do that. So it's a missed opportunity, James.
Yeah, a missed opportunity, but amazing. Well done. Congratulations. And it's nice that we're shining some positive things on our sector as well. Like, I love the fact that we're recognising real achievement in the sector, because often it's all the bad press and all the bad things that we do, but actually there's loads of good stuff going on in our sector, and there's loads of really big achievements in the sector. I looked at the finalists when I knew you'd won, and like you say, so many achievements in there from all the finalists.
And one of the things that actually I now realise, one of the reasons why I should have been attracted to housing originally, and if I was looking at it again, I should certainly see, is the whole range of opportunity of things you get to do. The different kind of activities that we play a role in housing, and I think for all that is good, and we may well come onto this later, but for all that is good, I do also think that sometimes we create a rod for our own back and try to be kind of all things to all people. So yes, as you say, there's we've got the opportunity to have influence right across communities, as well as just in your own housing association and the broader national sector. I'm very pleased and still can't quite believe it.
I love it. And I always like to ask this, but what's changed in that 30 years, you say? What's changed since when you was 18 to now in terms of the sector? What have been some of the fundamental things you've seen change in that time?
Gosh, so back in the 90s, the sector was much more paternalistic than it is now. Now, don't get me wrong, I realise that we've still got quite a way to go with that, but it was I suppose we were then seeing the emergence of housing associations, certainly stock transfer housing associations from council housing departments. So there was a big focus at the time on stock transfer commitments and sort of heavy investment in stock. And most stock transfer organisations at that time were run very similarly to council housing departments. So the kind of focus was different. And then back in the 90s, as the housing sector slumped and there was swathes of what is private built stock started to sit empty, the government decided that they would kind of use housing associations to buy up stock and try and kickstart the private sector market again. And at the time, we were getting 100% grant rates. That is a massive difference to where we are now and the grant rates that we get now. And so the landscape has, progressively got harder. And I think if we were given 100% grant rates today, we'd go looking for what the catch was, because that's kind of unreasonable, probably, as much as unlikely. So big difference in terms of kind of development and funding. I also think one of the things we have to bear in mind is that even in my short 30 years, all of this stock has got 30 years older. And so there's also a point about investment and how much investment we are putting into existing stock. And I'm sure that many other housing associations like us are putting in several £1 million more every year into your business plan, but it doesn't really touch the sides.
Yeah, so true. I saw the other day that Homes England have announced that we can use some of their funding now for regeneration stuff, which might help some of that, but there definitely needs to be more funding, I think, for the amount of investment we're going to have to. I mean, certainly some stock anyway, to get to band C even. I mean, we're going to struggle to get there with the amount of funding available at the moment. So we'll see how that is. Just help us understand Eastlight Homes a little bit. Just give us an overview and a helicopter view of the business as it is today.
Sure. So we were formed from merger in 2020. So 3 years old, coming up to 3 years old. This weekend. So we formed from two other housing associations. One was a traditional housing association and one was a stock transfer organisation. So we've got kind of concentrates of stock. We own just over 13,000 homes across Essex and sort of push into Suffolk and Norfolk. Turnover about 87 million. And we are G1 V1 with the regulator assess us there. We've still got a healthy new supply programme, delivered over 300 homes last year. So we're part of that top 50 building organisations at the moment. You know, who knows, I guess, where new supply chains go over the next wee while. And we've invested quite heavily since merger in trying to make ourselves more inclusive and diverse as an organisation. Our board is actually made up of 60% females now, and we are focused on the first couple of years on gender and disability in terms of trying to get the balance on that. So from a gender perspective, our gender pay gap has closed, and in actual fact last year there was a slight slant towards females. So we're within that tolerance, so we're proud of that. Amazing. And from a disability perspective, we're the housing lead with Purple, who are a disability provider. So we work with them for them to give us help on kind of service, home, and sort of employer accessibility. So we do quite a lot there, as well as being a community gateway organisation, which the term generally means nothing to most people. So I'm happy to explain that if that's useful.
Yeah, please do. Actually, yeah, that'd be great.
So one of our legacy organisations, Greenfields, was a community gateway organisation, and that was originally introduced at stock transfer to help allay some fears around how influence might play out for residents over time, because if the organisation was no longer to be controlled by the council, and we have the principles of that are absolutely sound. It's about, as I say, customers, residents being influential in your business. Now, the particular nuance around a community gateway organisation is that we offer a shareholding for any of our residents. So anybody with a tenancy can have a shareholding, which means they get a shareholding vote at our AGM. The difficulty that we face is that the kind of rights and powers that are bestowed in shareholding are part of companies law, and companies law, I understand, dates back to kind of 1800 and something. Wow. So it's not relevant anymore. We've just done a big consultation exercise with our customers to understand what they want to influence, and there is nothing on that list at all that represents kind of what people get as part of their shareholding offer. So, you know, appointment of auditors and sign off of financial statements and all that sort of thing. People want to be more involved in kind of the service delivery stuff. So one of the challenges we've got at the moment is working out how we modernise that and do that in a way that is more meaningful to the residents that we serve. So yeah, that's one of our challenges over the next couple of 3 years.
Yeah. And how will you tackle that challenge, would you say? Because that sounds like a big one for you to fix in terms of modernising.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we've done a big consultation exercise, so we kind of understand where the hearts and minds of of our customers are. We've also recently done some customer segmentation work. So again, we understand the characteristics and of our customers, because all of that is really important. And then for us, it's about kind of how we work with residents to put together something that feels meaningful and that isn't something that's just kind of landed on them, really. Since merger, we've worked hard to strengthen influence across the business. So we created a customer influence committee, which is a formal constituted committee of the board. It has its own delegation rights, like kind of all other committees. So be it audit and risk or whatever else people have in the business, our customer influence committee is part of the governance structure. So we do have that group of people that actually hold us to account, but also work very well with us to make sure that we're on track and their check and balance. So they'll play a heavy role in kind of whatever we do to look to evolve that. But it's as well as the fact that obviously we've got customers on our board, and all of those that are on the board have earned their places through a skills-based assessment. I guess that starts to play into the kind of point about our resident academy and kind of what we're doing there in order to try and sort of upskill people so that they've got a bit of sector knowledge when they arrive with us.
Yeah, I've got some questions on that, so we'll come back to the resident academy because I'm interested to dig into that. Well, the one thing that you've mentioned a lot, like post-merger, the merger was during a global pandemic. I mean, that's some feat in itself. I'm sure it wasn't planned that way, but it just probably happened that way. But in terms of tell us a little bit about why, I suppose, in terms of the merger and some of the complexities and difficulties of doing it during a pandemic, because clearly in some of those parts, I presume you can't get around a table, you can't talk to people. It must have been a really difficult engagement piece to do. Give us a bit of an overview of the why and also how the complexity of it was in terms of the pandemic.
Certainly. So the timing was both fortunate and unfortunate. I'll play a middle ground with it. So you're absolutely right. It made relationship building quite difficult. The thankful position for us is that we'd already approved an outline business case. So by the time we hit lockdown, and so there had been a lot of kind of relationships established prior to lockdown, which undoubtedly helped us. I think it would have been tricky had that not have been the case. From there, I mean, I suppose we experienced very similar challenges to everybody else in terms of kind of the ways of working and kind of getting formal documents signed. And our biggest issue was the risk around sort of funders, really, and them getting themselves into a place where they were able to kind of sign things off because they had to work out themselves how they were doing. So it was where we were in the hands of third parties. The trickiest bit really is the cultural piece. So, but again, there were challenges and opportunities in that. So we all were in a place where kind of all the cultural norms were in the air. And so we were able to use that as a way to kind of accelerate some of the stuff that we would have wanted to have done anyway, because there was kind of cultural icons that just disappeared with the pandemic. So there was some opportunities there. I mean, obviously the challenges are that you can kind of create the character, but the development of the character of the organisation, undoubtedly stalled in that first 12 months because we couldn't put people together. And in actual fact, it's only relatively recently that we've had an all-staff event. We did a lot of stuff online, and then we kind of did a lot of stuff in half the organisation, and then the other half in order to reduce the risk. But from my perspective, I suppose there's some frustration about how quickly you can kind of start to accelerate the cultural development. but in terms of kind of delivering merger commitments, the pandemic didn't really change or affect that, other than apprenticeship programs. We chose to delay strengthening apprenticeship programs because we didn't want to bring people into an organisation where we couldn't kind of properly support them.
Yeah. And what have been some of the benefits you've seen from the merger? Like, what have been some of the real key developments you've seen of the organisation, but also since, 2-3 years on, what have you seen as that cultural development? What have been some of the green shoots that you've seen now that you have been able to do an all-staff event and you've seen that character to develop?
So the tangible merger commitments, in terms of increased supply, new build supply, I've already mentioned that, and there were a number of kind of treasury gains from restructuring loans and those portfolios. I've mentioned an additional commitment to apprenticeships, and then obviously one of our strengths and what we see as our USP is that we are embedded in the community. So as part of a merger commitment, we decided that we would invest an additional £1 million in community work over the first 5 years. Wow. In actual fact, the board approved an additional £3 million over the first 5 years. And so out of that has borne mainly 3 streams of activity. One is our all-in programme, one is the Resident Academy, and the other one is our Community Alliance programme.
Amazing. I mean, I looked, when I was looking at Eastlight and doing my research for this, the commitment to community is just massive. But they also, the way that tenants are shareholders, as you've talked about, and have an active voice and influence in direction. Like, tell us a bit how that's impacted the relationship with the customer, firstly, and then sort of like, why is that commitment so important to you as a leader, would you say? Because, I mean, you really are, you've taken it to a new level, I would say, in terms of the community stuff, from what I can see you've done.
So, yeah, I mean, the all-in programme is the one that really kind of embeds us in the community, and that's designed to be very broad brush. So not just supporting our residents, but kind of supporting the wider community. We have an evaluation on that this coming quarter, because the first programme finished in May. But there's been loads of kind of good innovative stuff that's owned locally that's coming out of that. For us, it's about our value set and kind of how the organisation is facing. The board have an absolute genuine commitment to making sure that customers influence the direction of the organisation. And in actual fact, that customer influence committee, very quickly established their value and their worth.
Okay.
So it kind of feeds off the success of that. People see that it really is worth bringing customers into the room. So the impetus was there, and I realised that the landscape is such, that the regulator, the government, the increased presence of the Housing Ombudsman Service, they're everybody's pushing on customer influence, and so I recognised that most housing associations are having to do that. I mean, it was a deliberate choice for us, a handful of years ago, and I'm very pleased it was. And they also provide a level of moral compass, and they prevent us being paternalistic. So I talked earlier about we've still got some way to go, but they do check the discussion at board, and we'll make sure that people remain clear on where we're going. I mean, we all had conversations in the boardroom about whether or not we apply the full rent cap increase for April just gone. And I imagine there was sort of much hand wringing around the country, as there was in our boardroom about that. But, our customers were very clear about we weren't there to subsidise the profit share for energy companies. And in actual fact, if we didn't maximise our income, we would be in a position where we couldn't invest as much in their homes. And that whilst they were very clear that we needed to be able to provide support for those that really did struggle, actually our focus had to be on safeguarding, homes and assets. It's just a really useful challenge for us anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we talked off camera about this, but the Resident Academy, fantastic initiative, but tell us about it. Kind of where's it come from? What's been some of the benefits you've seen, and kind of what does it give to your residents that they don't already have, I suppose?
So the Resident Academy was a bit of a brainchild that came out of the merger discussion.
Oh, right.
So credit goes to probably Alison Inman, who most people know, and our chair Hattie Llewellyn Davis, who were really keen to support and will create a pipeline of people that can sort of land in the governance structure in a way that they can properly add value. So I know that, a number of other organisations sort of do this. Phoenix down in London have got a well-established framework for developing their residents. But for us, this Resident Academy was about providing, sort of fast-tracking people, I suppose, giving them confidence to sort of understand how housing associations work. So a lot of that's online, and in actual fact, it's been so successful and it's great. I don't know if you've seen any of the modules, but certainly the first module, which is history of social housing. Given I've got a degree in housing management and development, I'm probably one of the biggest housing anorexial finds. I loved watching that. It just reminded me of kind of why I went into housing. So in actual fact, those kind of online modules have got much greater stretch than we originally anticipated. Right. So we originally anticipated to use them, as I say, just for residents. We now use them for staff. So as part of induction, for all non-exec directors, not just ones that might come through our customer influence committee or kind of the Resident Academy route. And then what we've also done is put kind of an intensive in-person residential in to support those residents that are truly committed to coming through the ranks with us, and see aspirations to sit on our formal committees and boards. So we support them with in-person residential training. But yeah, essentially it's about upskilling people to mainstream them in our governance structure, because many of our tenants do have the financial skills, or they will have the professional expertise, but they don't have the confidence and won't necessarily have worked at a level where they come into a boardroom. And so trying to find ways to familiarise people with those kind of settings in advance, has to be really useful. So we have changed our succession plan for board to specifically allow for a sort of a tapered introduction for people. One of the things that we're conscious of is that you can have a 6-year term as a board member, and in actual fact, if you don't familiarise yourself with kind of how a boardroom works and committee structures, you could easily serve your 6 years before you're fully up to speed. So we've shaped our succession plan around that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been in housing 14, 15 years, and it used to feel like we put tenants on boards for the wrong reasons, i.e. we've done it now, there's someone on the board, but they never really had a voice because they didn't have the confidence, like you said, to speak up or be able to challenge things because they didn't understand what they were challenging. So I think it's really important that we upskill people so that they get a fair crack at that role and that opportunity, because like you say, 6 years is not a long time to get into one of those roles and add value. I think it's a really, really useful thing. And I think more and more of companies that I'm speaking to are starting to implement this if they've not already. I think it's a wonderful initiative.
One of the things I find particularly strange is that we refer to resident board members as a sector. So we don't just call them board members. They kind of get this weird special title that makes them different. And I'm very much of the view that, a board member is a board member. They have the same contract. Their responsibilities are the same. Their accountabilities are the same. Give these people, be consistent about it. They are board members. Let's not qualify their status, by saying, oh, well, those are our resident ones. As you say, it kind of implies that they've managed to get themselves on the boards by some kind of special pass because they have to hold a tenancy. And the reality is as I say, we expect absolutely the same from everybody on our board, regardless of what their kind of home ownership status is.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a really nice thing to, and I agree. It's just the way everyone speaks about it, isn't it? That person's a board member, that person's a resident, but it's the same thing. It's the same role. As we look to kind of present day then, never been more difficult to be a chief exec, I don't think, in this sector. I mean, there's a lot of challenges going on. What do you see as some of the fundamental challenges we need to fix as a sector in the coming years? Because there's so many, we've just been at the CIH, so many narratives at the moment, decarbonisation, cost of living crisis, new build, development, must build more. There's so many things going on. How do you prioritise that and how do you fix some of those issues? Because I don't think you can fix all of them necessarily in one go. But what are your thoughts around where the key challenges are going to be for us in the next few years?
So I think sort of fundamentally, I will say that I think all housing associations broadly do the same thing. We have the same purpose. I know that we kind of all write it down slightly differently, but broadly we all do the same thing. What differentiates us, I think, is kind of like you say, the priority of investment. So what do we all prioritise? Because there's that kind of finite bucket, and is it new supply? Is it investing in existing stock? So you're right. How do we prioritise it? Well, we will be prioritising it through that kind of conversation with customers and understanding kind of what is live. I guess what's forefront of my mind is the stock investment challenges that we talked about earlier, and the need to invest more heavily in kind of the whole of the stock. So you're right, there's a point about kind of EPC C or above. But, there's also a point about communal areas. There's a point about kind of the broader landscape and sort of furniture that surrounds individual kind of boxes or homes that again I would guess is missing from the majority of business plans. And that's where that point about regeneration comes in. And so, I was pleased to see the Homes England announcement this week, and kind of I shall be waiting for the detail to come out behind that. I think one of the challenges we are going to have is that we are all going to simultaneously turn to look to regenerate different areas. And so I think there'll be an issue around skills there, and kind of shortage of skills. We've got the same issue when it comes to already got that issue when it comes to looking at the net zero carbon agenda, and most of us aren't beyond the sort of starting blocks with that one. So I think kind of scarcity of skills, being able to attract people into a sector that is actually not very well liked at the moment, and certainly not very well trusted by the general public, and by our residents as well. So and then I think the other big thing that we will all be turning our attention to is what is the new rent formula that will come out post, hopefully over the next few months. Really, we'll start to understand what that looks like, because none of us can kind of plan 30 years out when we don't even know what the new rent formula is going to be after next year.
Yes, totally agree. And you mentioned about skills. I agree. I mean, we're already seeing that retrofit assessors and they're not available. They're not there. So somewhere there's got to be a grant to create those skills and retrain, because you kind of look at a population of, say, gas engineers. Is that going to be an obsolete role in 10 years? Can we do something there? There's so many things we need to think about because the skills won't be available. I already see lots of people pulling away from new build delivery of homes because from a contracting perspective, they're struggling to make it work. But we desperately need to create more. So it is a conflict.
And that's the balance, isn't it, as you say? And can you reskill or transfer the skills of some of those that are currently working on new supply schemes? It's just regeneration is much more difficult and is fraught with many more risks than simply taking a Section 106 site from a developer, for example.
Yeah, no, of course. And 5 years for you now in the top job, and I think based on what you've just experienced with the award and stuff, what's some of the key advice you'd give to aspiring future leaders? Because again, you talked about confidence, and I really like what you said about giving people the confidence at board level. I speak to lots and lots of people every week, and I think there's a confidence issue in people testing and challenging themselves to even apply to some of the roles at the top end. And we see that more in women than men, to be honest. But what would be some of your advice to future leaders and aspiring future leaders of the sector to take that step and to be confident to go and do a chief exec role or a director role? It doesn't have to be chief exec.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think, again, the backdrop of the sector doesn't necessarily help with confidence because, can I do it? Gosh, there's a lot of challenges. People personally come under quite a lot of criticism if things go wrong in their organisations. You do shoulder that in this sort of role, but it's about how you grow your resilience, really. And I think resilience is one of the things that you kind of have to personally work on and use a coach. I mean, certainly coaching has really helped me. I talked earlier about the fact that there's so many different things to do in housing. So there's so many different opportunities. And of course, if you want to be a chief executive, then, you can't just become a better technical expert in the area that you started in. By the time you get to certainly sort of director level, you need to be thinking much more strategically, and so you need a much greater breadth of experience. So getting breadth of experience kind of before you're sort of applying for those sort of roles is really useful. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to do that in my career. I'd also say that nothing ventured, nothing gained, really. And
absolutely.
And you can learn as much from a bad career move as you can from a good career move. It's kind of how you then sort of deal with that and then kind of take what you've learned from that and move on as well. So but I think the one thing that we should do more is promote the kind of fundamental value set that the sector sits on. We are kind of full of social purpose, and I think you alluded to this earlier when you talked about kind of new generations coming into the workforce actually really value that sort of thing, and yet we don't do a great job of promoting that. So I think it's kind of bestowed on those of us that are sort of senior leaders in the sector now to make sure that we do a lot of that messaging. My reflection on kind of the last few days and the conferences, we are very good at articulating the challenges and the problems. And I think we need to get as good at articulating how we're going to come up with the solutions and what the opportunities might be.
Yeah, no, I agree. What were some of the things that you worked on when you became a chief exec? So what have been some of the things that you found you had to upskill yourself on? May it be attributes, might be skills, but what were some of the things that were different when you became chief exec than you didn't expect?
What didn't I expect? Well, I suppose it's not that I didn't expect. There's an awful lot of work that you have to put in order to make sure that even if you kind of walk into a job where, and it's implicit, isn't it? You walk into a job and people kind of trust you, you're the new person in, but you do need to make sure that that you build the appropriate relationships with people,
Of course.
so that they, kind of understand how you tick, but that you understand how they work as well. We've been doing a big piece in the business at the moment about how to give assurance rather than reassurance, and I think there's a real, if you're somebody that can kind of absolutely nail how to give assurance, then that's really useful. So making sure that you can do that piece. For me, I think it's about kind of just taking a breath. I'm not known necessarily for kind of being laid back, shall we say, put it like that. So it's about how I manage my expectations. I think there's that. Most people laugh about the fact that I want everything done yesterday, and that's not necessarily true. But I kind of learn how to manage my expectations and then kind of overall pace, because for me, moving at pace is appropriate and necessary. Moving at such a speed that you kind of fall over is absolutely wrong. And there is in the organisation, I think, and this happens everywhere, and it's a positional thing, not a personal thing. But people will very much say, Emma says, or whoever the chief exec is, so and so says.
Of course.
And kind of myth busting some of that and getting people to take responsibility for, if it's a decision they're making, then how do you get people to kind of have the confidence to take responsibility for that, and where people hear that as a reason to do something, to be professionally curious. And we're not curious enough as a professional, as individuals. Really, we do things because we think somebody says that's the right thing to do, rather than because we actually know it is the right thing to do. So lots there.
Yeah, there is lots there. I think as well, I always find it fascinating because when you watch people move into chief exec roles, I've worked in leadership roles myself, and you've gravitated towards the thing you're a specialist in sometimes because it's the thing you feel most comfortable talking about, when actually what you need to do is surround yourself with good people that are specialists in their area. But I find myself like fixating on the one thing I'm good at rather than, and leave all the stuff like finance, etc., to other people. But clearly, like when you become a chief exec, it becomes much more difficult to not hone in on the thing that you used to do all of the time, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I say to my guys is, the litmus test is, you shouldn't know what my background career is. I mean, I might tell you what it is, but you shouldn't see that play out day to day, because you're absolutely right. As a chief exec, it is about breadth. So you do have to have your eye as much on kind of the finances as you do on understanding kind of, I don't know, work in progress in your repairs team. And I guess that's the point about breadth, really. And I also think it's about kind of how you then position stuff for board. I mean, everybody in the sector is seeing changing financial metrics, and whilst that particularly gives sleepless nights to chief finance officers and finance directors, there is a point about kind of how we contextualise that for board, and how we manage the board's risk appetite appropriately around all of that sort of stuff. And that's not my go-to stuff. My go-to stuff is customer. My go-to stuff is, if you can give me a housing officer job, I'll take it every day of the week. But, some of that other stuff, as you say, has to be towards the top of my to-do list.
Yeah, I love that. And a couple of last things for me. The thing coming through around CIH qualifications, being someone that has come through a qualified route in your career, how important do you think that'll be? Or do you think that might limit the choices we have of hiring people from other sectors, therefore stricken in the way that we can bring in new skills, new ideas, more diversity into our sector? Where do you currently stand on CIH qualifications?
I think they're useful. And I think they are useful because it does provide a level of kind of independence around trust for customers. So it's that point that people are competent at doing the job that they are there to do. And I also think that from a sort of professional perspective, we've lost a lot of pride in the profession over the last probably 15 plus years. You know, there used to be any number of formal qualifications that you could go and do with various different colleges and universities. They all packed up, and they stopped predominantly because we stopped sending people to them on day release. And I think we lost the focus and pride in our own professionalism. And instead we said, well, we'll just employ people from a different sector because they're better than us. And I think the reality is that, you know, we're all human, we're all people. And there was a quote, and I mentioned this when I was speaking on Tuesday. There was a quote I heard last week that really stuck with me about, you know, if you employ someone to do a job, then they will work for your money. If you employ somebody to work in your business and join your value set, then they will give you blood, sweat and tears. And I think that's really true. So for me, yes, the qualifications are, I think, right. Ultimately, they're not a magic bullet, though, because attitude speaks volumes, actually. And you can have a professional qualification and have a terrible attitude towards your work or your customers, and that's no good. So I think it's a blended approach to this. I take your point about, does that mean that we're going to struggle to recruit? I think it goes back to that point about, you know, we need to actively think about how we make ourselves a sector that people have even heard of, as well as want to come and work in. I mean, I don't know any careers officer that promotes housing as a career. I see adverts on the telly for becoming accountants and going into accountancy apprenticeships. You know, we're really silent as a sector, and I think that's on us.
I agree totally. And it's one of my last final questions is, how do we attract the next generation of Emma Palmers into the sector, 18, 20, you know, that are thinking about their career choices? I've got really strong views on this. I still think we're advertising jobs like we're in the 1990s sometimes, where we put it on a job board. My daughter's 13. She wouldn't be going on a job board to find her job, I don't believe. She'll be on TikTok or, I don't know, somewhere else. And we've got to go to those people on their own channels, not on our channels, I think. But what's your view on how we make the sector more attractive and what we can do to attract the next generation and have more people? I think I've done 50 episodes and you're the first person that chose housing in those 50 leaders. That's not great.
We'll struggle to find many more.
Yeah, I'll try, but there's not many. There's really not.
There's not. There's a handful that I know of, but not many more. And so I think that is the crux of it. You know, we can't just rely on people falling into housing. You're absolutely right. It's about making this profession accessible, and not just accessible, but kind of interesting. You know, I'll never forget seeing one of our job adverts that asked for a garage waiting list administrator. I mean, I'm not sure that you could think of a much duller job title, could you? I mean, it doesn't attract people. So I think we need to think about kind of our it's not our branding, is it? We need to think about kind of what we're doing with this and make some really conscious efforts to kind of connect with the generations that are coming through, really think about our employment offer. So we've done this recently, and I'm absolutely certain that it helps kind of attract and retain staff. We introduced a new set of terms and conditions, and as part of that, we gave men and women the equivalent kind of maternity-paternity rights. So men get 3 months off when, you know, they have a baby that's born. And, you know, that's really important to people. And in actual
it is.
I think that kind of helps retain, and it just makes things more modern. We offer a wellbeing grant. So you get £200 a year that you can kind of spend on pretty much what you want. If you know, spa day, pair of trainers, or actually a lot of people this year have used it to pay for their energy bills because of the issue that we've got this year. So I think it's about kind of connecting with your employment base and really understanding what people want, and you know, being a bit humble about it, I think, rather than arrogant and assume that kind of, as you say, what the job descriptions and kind of the way we worked back in the 1990s or early 2000s is relevant or current today, and the fact that anybody wants to do it, because we don't.
Yeah, agreed. And it's storytelling, and I don't think we do it very well. I don't know why. There's loads of good stuff we could talk about: energy, sustainability, giving back, social purpose, but you just don't tell the story well. We're silent on it most of the time, which is a shame. As we just finish off, last question really is just, what are you excited about? What is the next 3 or 4 years going to look like at Eastlight, and what are you excited about in the next chapter of your career, really?
Yeah, well,
award-winning chief exec, now we can call you.
There you go. Oh dear, I'm comfortable. So what will the next 5 years look like for Eastlight or the sector? Well, who knows? I mean, you know, we wrote a 5-year corporate strategy back in 2020, and we're now refreshing it because you know, the external landscape's moved on so much. So who knows where 5 years, what things look like in 5 years. I mean, obviously we will plan for it in the best way that we can, and we've talked about kind of all the big ticket items that need to go in there, and I don't know how we're able to do all of those things. Well, we certainly can't. It will be about prioritization. What am I excited about? I'm excited about the fact that you know, we have got all this stuff that's rolling, and we've got all this stuff that we've got to kind of try and manage and balance. And to some extent, I think you kind of mentioned this possibly off camera, but you know, what a time to start as chief exec 5 years ago, and you kind of hit all of these different crazy things. And I suspect that the different crazy things will continue. But you know what? I'd rather have that. For me, that keeps me focused, it keeps me fresh, rather than have kind of pattern repeat year on year. And I think that pattern repeat is no good for kind of business efficiency, for making sure that we're kind of held account by customers, and for keeping energy levels really. So if you build your resilience, it'll all be exciting.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely way to finish. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. I know that we've had a big week on the CIH. Well done on your award. I mean, you must be proud of that. I know that you didn't want me to mention it, but we are where we are. But thank you so much.
No, thank you. And yes, of course I am. And made up. And from my perspective, you know, particularly all my success over the last 3 years is absolutely not down to me. It's down to kind of the team that you kind of build behind you. So my thanks to them.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much, and we'll get you back on. I'm excited to see what Eastlight do in the next few years, and we'll track your journey.
Super. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.